Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the What the Niche podcast. And I am your Caped Crusader and host for this very special episode of the podcast. Before we get into the nit and gritty of this week's discussion, I want to quickly remind everyone that my site is up and running at whatteniche.net. Also, t-shirts will be available in the store, which will launch this week, courtesy of my boy Corey Higdon. Mad shout out to him. I will be having him on a later podcast. His story is incredible, and I'd like to thank him for those t-shirts. I can't wait to see those. Thanks everyone, as always, for your support, and I hope that you continue to share the show. Now, on to the show.
How do you feel now, Superman?
Wait a minute. You're not Vanderglass, you're Cy Horton.
That's right, Buster. It's too late, Superman.
I feel...
Yeah?
weak, dizzy.
And
I feel...
yeah?
weak.
Emergency. Batman speaking. Warning all of you to brace yourselves for big news.
The biggest.
Tell them, Robin.
Holy superlatives, Batman! It's really exciting. Soon, very soon, Batman and I will be batapulting right out of your TV sets and onto your theater screens.
That's right, Robin. Our first full-length motion picture feature in color opens a whole new world of thrills.
You want to know how I got these scars? My father was a drinker and a fiend. And one night, he goes off crazier than usual. Mommy gets the kitchen knife to defend herself. He doesn't like that. Not one bit. So, me watching, he takes the knife to her, laughing while he does it. He turns to me and he says, "Why so serious?" He comes at me with the knife. "Why so serious?" He sticks the blade in my mouth. "Let's put a smile on that face."
To make wild accusations or insinuate that I'm a superhero.
I never said you were a superhero.
Didn't? Mm-mm. Well, good, because that would be outlandish and fantastic. I'm just not the hero type, clearly, with this laundry list of character defects, all the mistakes I made, largely public. The truth is, I am Iron Man.
We got him.
Banner?
Just like you said.
Then tell him to suit up. I'm bringing the party to you.
I don't see how that's a party.
Dr. Banner. Now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
That's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry.
There was a time when the heroes who wore bright-colored capes and spandex were the saving grace for the kids sitting alone in the dark recesses of the cafeteria, their minds filled with wonder and awe as the bold images on the pages burrowed into their souls and lifted their spirits. Comics have long acted as scripture for many, and the hymns were relayed one strategically placed cell at a time. The lore of the parishioners of justice echo through the cathedrals of the minds of the faithful readers. Now the sacred texts of those illustrious figures who have graced the pages of history books of fantasy and imagination have conquered the silver screen. The summer blockbuster has now become synonymous with superheroes, and those who felt as though these characters were theirs now have to share their precious mentors of whimsical amazement with the world. But as alleged nerd culture emerges as the new normal, it's now become simple culture. Fans of all things extraordinary and exciting reap the benefits of a paradigm shift, where the reigning kings and queens of the cinematic medium have become Spider-Man, and Batman, Black Panther or the Avengers. And it's likely these stories speak to so many because so often people feel helpless in their own lives. And for a few short hours, whether we see those members of the unbelievable society on a page or the big screen, we can root for those otherworldly figures and simply let go of our daily problems. For those who have always been fans of the phantasmagorical worlds of comics, now is the time to bask in the glory of the renaissance of your beloved stories, which the world has now embraced.
My publisher came racing into my office. Stan, you remember that character we both loved so much, Spider-Man? He said, let's do him as a series. Now, why am I telling you this? Besides the fact that I have to kill a little time. If you have an idea that you genuinely think is good, don't let some idiot talk you out of it. Now, that doesn't mean that every wild notion you come up with is going to be genius, but if there is something that you feel is good, something you want to do, something that means something to you, try to do it. Because I think you can only do your best work if you're doing what you want to do, and if you're doing it the way you think it should be done, and if you can take pride in it after you've done it, no matter what it is. If you can look at it and say, I did that, and I think it's pretty damn good. That's a great feeling. So don't let idiots talk you out of something that you think is good.
This clip is an excerpt from a keynote speech given at UCLA by Stan Lee, who was a once-in-3 lifetimes figure. He seeded a garden that blossomed into one of the most beautiful and bountiful providers of joy. The crops have now spread far and wide, as Marvel and comic books in general have become an absolute global phenomenon. Which brings me to my guest this week. His name is Marco Rudy. He is a world traveler, explorer, and comic book artist. His journeys brought him all the way from his home country of Mozambique to Montreal, Canada. In our chat, we discuss how Marco was able to find a path into the comic book world and how he eventually created runs of Spider-Man, Winter Soldier, X-Men, and many other famous characters in the comic book world. The unlikely rise of a kid from Africa with dreams of creating versions of the superheroes he loved is one which I hope will inspire and captivate my audience. So without further ado, here is the amazing chat I had with my new friend, Marco Rudy.
Marco Rudy. I am a comic book artist. I am a would-be writer because I have been writing for the past 2 or 3 years. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, I have worked in a comic book industry. I've worked in it for about 13 years, over at Marvel, over at DC, over at Image, Dark Horse. So I've been around, I guess. And yeah, that's I do some stuff.
Right on. So with you working, I know you said Winter Soldier was one thing that you had done. Have you actually had the opportunity to work with anybody in the film industry? Have you worked as like maybe sort of someone who is a resource that they talk to while they're writing scripts or screenplays?
No, because those tend to be fairly disconnected to the comic book side of things.
Yeah.
I think the closest that I've done was working with the gaming industry. I worked with the Riot Studios, which is the studios that makes the game League of Legends.
Oh yeah.
So I did something for them, but again, even in that, it was kind of their other projects side of things. So, but yeah, that's about it, I guess. Because as I said, I think outside of writers that write for games and write for movies and series that also write for comics, the companies tend to these things are disconnected from each other. They don't talk to each other in that way.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that, like, we talked a little bit about this before we started our official chat here, is that a lot of individuals who are knee deep and really in the trenches of the comic book world can oftentimes be rather mean and judgmental.
Yeah.
I think that it's something dear, precious.
Yeah.
And I think that you have to understand that what Marvel and DC have done is they basically went ahead and created their own separate universe and entity based upon that original story. Because if you try to equate everything, that's not how it was in the comic. Well,
yeah.
You have to separate yourself from that, because otherwise you're gonna be pissed off a lot.
What has happened is that because the movies are made to be of easy consumption, there's a lot of elements from the movies that then influence the stories told nowadays, with advantages and disadvantages to the medium of comics, to the stories that they want to tell, to the baggage that they have as well.
Do you think it's a negative impact that the films?
I think it's there's good and the bad that comes with it. I think one of the bad things is oversimplification. There's a lot of interesting, intricate stuff that works well in comics that the movies simplified for the story to flow better in that format. That then is translated it's taken to comics, that you kind of lose some of the richness of comics, but at the same time, there's a lot of convoluted stuff in comics, like lots of convoluted stuff that the movie industry streamlines to make it for easy consumption, that helps then the stories in comics. So as I said, there is good and bad that you can take from this baggage of stuff that's coming from the cinema.
Yeah, it's certainly been profitable. I mean, yes, I mean, you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and when you talk about Nolan's Batman series, that every release, broke the previous single weekend record, and so on and so forth. So evidently, they know what they're doing.
The only thing that I would add to this is just that the companies, the parent companies of there is a point of revenue and a point of portraying a little more of the comic book industry in the cinema environment, which is the actual going to the theater. They could have racks with comics there to expose people that go to the theater to these stories, which they don't. And that is an excellent opportunity for more sales of comics, and for people to be more acquainted with comics themselves, with how different they are, how the stories play out in the comics versus the movies. They never do that, which is a shame. It's a complete lost opportunity. I mean, ever since this wave of I was going to say since the Iron Man, but Marvel, the first Marvel movie, or the first successful Marvel movie, was Blade in '98. So ever since then, they never ever took the advantage of just putting some racks with comics, promoting what they're selling, which is odd. What they do is they go then to the comic book industry to make comic adaptations of the movies, which are also adaptations of stories from comics. And you're like, I mean, it's just a waste of time and waste of resources when you could just put, hey, these are the X-Men new movie, these are the X-Men stories that are going about right now, or here is a graphic novel that inspired this movie that you're seeing right now. on the racks there for people to buy at the actual theaters. They could make a lot of money, and this would help the comic book industry.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, I don't know, and like I mentioned before we started talking, that I've seen every Marvel movie, every single one in theater, and I own every single one. So even some of the ones that were lesser appreciated, like the second Thor movie, and but I bought them all just to have like the entire collection. And yeah, dude, you're right. Like, how are you missing that opportunity to have those comics there?
Yes,
and accessible. And how it seems as though they do this with the TV series and things of that nature, where they do little tidbits. I know that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had done some things that were giving you some sort of background or out on the fringes.
Oh, they had a series. The Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was so successful that they then made a series of comics, which were, I mean, rather than like, instead of using that as this is your entry into the comics, it was, this is successful, therefore it makes money, so let's make a comic book series out of that. Still not promoting it. It was more just, this is again, it's just silly. It's just silly. It's a very simple thing to do, to put the racks of comics on the theaters.
Do you think they're using comics as story farms? Where they're just like, hey, just let them do this series, and then that's something that we can pull from, or basically now, since Disney owns Marvel, we'll just take it. That story exists.
I'm not even saying that Disney or Warner Brothers does that. Everybody does that. Like,
Disney's the worst. And
no, but the thing is, it's not even. I'm not defending Disney at all. I'm just saying.
Oh no, I get it. You work for them.
I'm just saying. No. Regardless of working or not, it's just like, this is like, I would even go as far as capitalism. It's just true. It's just because Hollywood loves money. So instead of coming up with new ideas, like, let's just farm somewhere. So for a while is the remakes and revivals and whatever, and then comics makes money. So so Disney has all this stuff, and Warner Brothers has all this stuff. What is this other stuff that we can get? So there's Netflix getting a bunch of series and movies out of independent stuff, and Hollywood gets a bunch of series and movies out of independent stuff because money. That's just it. I'm like, yeah, it is what it is. It just, as I said, my only point to that is it is short-sighted for the companies that are then, the comic book companies that are then involved in this industry, to not promote themselves. So it's just silly. It's just silly. Promote your product rather than your characters. Promote your product, because it will only. The bottom line is you will be more successful, but they're just not doing that. It just blows my mind.
And how many people are fans of the cinematic universes, such as myself, that aren't into the comics, that would probably be into the comics. Like, as I'm exposed to them, and somebody will say, hey, read this. I used to have a roommate, shout out to my boy Chris Whitworth. You guys would get along smashingly. He's absolutely obsessed with comics. He has 15 or 20,000 or something, I don't know. His body's completely covered in his arms are all comic book tattoos, completely sleeved. His legs are video game tattoos and things of that nature. And he would push things to me. He would be like, hey, check out the Civil War series. And that's 10 years before there was ever the cinematic universe, really. They were still doing the original X-Men movies and whatever, but he's like, this is like the best thing that's ever been done. The art's amazing, and it really caught me. And I sat down and read a couple of them because he was like, check it out. So, because I didn't have exposure to it. They weren't marketing it in the proper way. I think it was, I almost wonder, it feels like there is still a slight aversion to nerd culture becoming mainstream.
Oh, yeah. There's
which is so weird, like, because now it's not even considered to be uncool. They have the Nerdist network, and everybody listens to it. It ain't just nerds that go on there. Chris Hardwick sits down and talks to literally every person on the planet. And so it's not this outside thing anymore, but I still feel like there's there's those people that are hanging on to it near and dear because it was something that they found that outlet, and that's fine. But don't be mean when other people are trying to get into it. Oh, you probably never played D&D in your life, bro. Get out of here.
That's that gateballing thing that I was talking about. Before that, it's unfortunate that there is a group of people that they're just too resistant to new people. However, like I understand some of them. Like this has been your escape from jobs, from the world for a very long time, and now the world is trying to get to you, and you're like, no, this is my thing. I understand that defensiveness, but it's just you got. It is what it is. You gotta live. You gotta move on and change with the world. That's just the way it is. You can't be stuck in that ideal that, oh no, this is my thing forever. It can be your thing, and then you can also make it somebody else's thing rather than being defensive about people entering discovering comics now or whatever. It's just silly.
Yeah, agreed, man. I get excited when people start to get in things that I'm into. It excites the shit out of me. I'm like, dude, I get excited to talk to them about it, horror movies or films in general, or they go see a particular play that I like. I'm excited to talk to them about it. I don't care if that was the first thing they ever went to and, it's the first play they've ever seen. I'm not going to be mad. Oh, you're just now going to see plays and you think it's good? I'm like, that's great. You like it. It's awesome. Let's talk about it.
I even understand people that go as far as like people that go to they experience the cinematic universes and they come to you with the knowledge of the cinematic universe and talk like with pomp and circumstance, like, oh yeah, this is this because I know. I take pleasure in schooling them, but at the same time, I also know that people get very, very aggressive towards as in, oh, the fuck what do you think and therein they assume that they're justified in being aggressive towards this new person because they're being obnoxious. You can just be obnoxious back and that was that. You can stop it at there rather than being, oh yeah, fuck you, or like unnecessary. But I love to have fun with people that go about, oh, this is this. I'm like, not really.
You're like, but is it though?
Yeah.
I think it's important to kind of meet. I do the same thing, and anybody that's my friend knows I start a bunch of shit on Facebook. I just post things to get people riled up, and then I just kind of sit back and eat popcorn. I'm bad about it, but it's one of my favorite pastimes. So I understand that sometimes it is kind of fun to poke somebody that's like, oh yeah, I know all about this, and you're like, well, stop being a dick about it, A, and then B, maybe you don't.
Yes, but especially if you don't, just you don't. It's might as well just keep quiet.
Right. Yeah. So we've already dug deep here, man. This is awesome. I usually like to start these conversations with asking people, so understanding what the different niches are. There's always things that people assume about people, and I'm sure you've encountered this. Some of the misconceptions that are perceived about you as a comic book artist. What are some of the things that you've encountered that maybe you can just kind of like put it in the kibosh there?
Well, I don't know, because mostly people have misconceptions about the way I look, I guess, because being a comic book artist, your name is on the cover, not your face. So people tend to like, is this, until they see you, they Google you or whatever. The biggest one, again, is it's not about the comic book industry, it's more just personal. It's just people assume that I was Brazilian for a long time, and I'm not. And people
Where are you from?
I am originally from Mozambique, but I'm Canadian now.
Oh, right on.
Mozambique is a country in the southern side of the continent of Africa. It's very close to South Africa. And that's about it. However, one of the questions you asked me at the beginning, therein lies some of the biggest assumptions, which is, what is your contact with the movie side of things? When I talk about, oh, I have worked for Marvel, I have worked for DC, I have in contact with that, the assumption is that you have some say in the movies or that you have some connections to it. Through conventions, I have met a bunch of actors and some of like people that are involved in the movie side of things, but normally those are quite disconnected. So to assume that, like, I understand the assumptions, it's like, not really. I wish. I bump into these people at conventions and at like a green rooms or the odd party that I'm allowed to go or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it definitely has its probably benefits. You probably have some ends that other people don't.
Yeah. I would say that I have access to these people. Like, I have easier access to these people at conventions, mostly because of green rooms and especially shows that I'm a guest of. I'm a guest at, not a guest of. If there's a party for the show in which the stars are there, I will have a chance to then talk to them in person.
Have you ever met anybody that
was
a disappointment?
Disappointment, Lou Ferrigno.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he didn't want to talk at all. He was stonewalled. He didn't want to talk at all. Outside of, I guess, it was just it was. I wanted to say it was just with me, but it was a bunch of people. So maybe he was having a bad day, but specifically him, yeah. But Richard Dean Anderson, he was grumbling. He was also not having a good time. but outside of that, it's fine. I met one of I think it was in Louisville. I met Eccleston, one of the Doctor Who guys.
Oh, yeah.
And he was pretty charming. He was a nice guy. I like him.
Yeah, those conventions are wonderful. I mean, it's just such a cool place. Like, everybody's as excited about all the content as you are.
One guy that I met that was one of those casual coincidences that are like pretty cool was, remember the cartoon show for the X-Men, the one in the 90s?
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So the guy that does the voice for Wolverine, Steve Blum, I mean, he's done a voice for a bunch of stuff, from video games, for series and whatnot. So his voice is highly recognizable, but he had just woken up. So I was just eating at like the green room, just eating. And the guy's like, "Can I sit here?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So we started talking about both our industries and the life as freelancers, the certainty or the uncertainty, getting gigs, the pride of getting gigs and not getting gigs, the like just discussing life as a freelancer in general. And we had like a pretty lengthy 30 to 40 minute conversation. Somebody came about, other voice actors. I did not know who he was. And he's like, we've been talking for all this time. What's your name? I'm like, "I'm Marco." And he's like, "I'm Steve." And when he said, like, "Oh man, you're Steve Blum," I'm like, "Yeah, you're Wolverine." He started laughing, like, "Yeah." And rather than going, "Oh my God," we just resumed the conversation as normal, just talking about like normal life and how our industries are similar and how they differ in freelancing. Essentially, it was a great chat that I had with him, but it's just one of those happy coincidences. He's just a guy that sat by my table and started chatting about.
Yeah, those are fun because you get to have a better experience with that person rather than you standing in line and just like freaking out when you meet them. And
yeah. I
had a similar experience to that with Doug Jones.
Yeah.
Because Doug Jones is not known for Doug Jones. Like, he never gets to look like
the
Doug
nostalgia
Jones.
critic.
Yeah, he's always covered in makeup from head to toe, and
he's got the hat and the glasses. It's very easy to recognize.
Yeah, if you've ever seen Doug Jones, which you don't get to see Doug Jones on film, because it's just his frame. And so we went up to his booth, and of course, I mean, I knew who he was, but we ended up getting to have it was a slow day for him, which was sad because he was just the best guy. He sat there and talked to me, my buddy, for 25 minutes. We talked about how much he loves Yermo and different experiences he had, how much he loved Ron Perlman and,
Yeah.
a lot of those people that he had gotten to work with, and was just, he's like, I'm so excited that you're excited to talk to me. And it was just a cool, that's the right attitude to have. You're excited that I'm here, so I'm excited you're here.
Yeah. Do you know the Red Letter Media guys? Mr. Plinkett.
Oh, I mean, I know of them, but I don't know.
Yeah. So what I didn't know, like, first show that I went was one in Toronto in 2011, and they were there. Red Letter Media was there. So going back to, because I've watched the Star Wars reviews back to back to back. In fact, I watched it so many times that I put it as like a background noise to fall asleep to sometimes. One of the times I was just watching their videos, they're like, oh yeah, we're at the show here in Toronto. And I'm like, wow, I was at that show, and I passed by that booth and nobody was there. And then as they were talking about their experience, they're like, yeah, nobody came to a booth. Like, who gives a shit about Star Wars reviews and whatnot? And this was right at the beginning of the Star Wars reviews. Nowadays, that thing has millions of views, like millions. They're super famous. No way they'll go to a show and anybody's gonna like miss them. But it was just funny to see that it's one of those things like, oh, I was at that thing where these guys were, and I passed by their booth and I didn't know that they were who they are now.
Yeah, like, things come and go. They come and go in waves. And, with the resurgence, I'm sure they just, that's a happy accident.
Yeah.
Because before, a couple years before that, George Lucas might have been talking about making the movies, but everybody was kind of like, well, sure. Okay. Whenever it happens, it happens. Kind of like the Avatar movies with James Cameron. Everybody's kind of like, yeah, they'll be out sometime 2028. Because he's been saying
when we're living in the Navi world is when they're coming out. He's going to film live from there.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Real 3D becomes real 3D.
Oh man, I can't wait for that, because he'll be at the forefront of it, because he's one of those people that he waits. He's patient, and people get a little irritated with him. They say he's tough, but everybody talks about he knows what the hell he's doing, because he changes the way movies are made for 10 years at a time.
He's just waiting for it for the cinema experience to become the hologram, the holovid from Star Trek. So like, this is it. You're in Navi now. Experience it. Oh, by the way, this is the movie. That's it.
Can you imagine? I want to dance with the Navi.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, Zoe Saldana, even blue, she looked good. I was like, girl, what up?
Obviously, yeah.
So I don't know if you're a big fan of that film, but what they've created at Disney's Animal Planet, or Animal Kingdom, rather.
It's
crazy.
It's like this. I watched the movie, and I'm not a fan of the 3D experience, mostly because I wear glasses, so I have to wear glasses on top of glasses, and it's not fun. And so, yeah, I understand that it was a pretty innovative movie or production, all of it. However, the story was the story of Disney's Pocahontas. So I'm like watching the movie, I'm like, oh, this is Pocahontas.
Yeah, or Dances with Wolves, elements of that too.
And the movie keeps going, like, that is definitely Dances with Wolves and Pocahontas. So there's a scene where a character disappears, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna reappear as the heroic savior. As I am saying this, the scene, you're like, wow, this is not predictable at all. So the movie technically is astonishing, is excellent, fantastic. The story is predictable. You mentioned the Nolan Batman movies. If you think about those movies, they're not as great a masterpieces as they seem, but like in the technical aspect, they're very well shot, excellent photography, great soundtrack, the mood of each of the three movies is fantastic. The stories are flawed on the three. The third movie is not good, like, at all. It's to the point that I was laughing out loud in the theater. But it had, as I said, the production side, the photography, cinematography, excellent. Just the story is like,
Yeah, I think he was, and that's the thing is like you have to take a movie into account the sum of all its parts. So some movies are going to have strengths and weaknesses, and other movies that you pick apart. Like, I mean, if you look at Nolan's Inception, for me, that's a perfect film. Just all the little nuance and the perfect attention to detail on what. If you go through as a psychological experiment and you break down like the things that are supposed to happen in dreams, he did a like 3 or 4 months of like dream study to know the different things that can happen in dreams to build that world that he did. So with Batman, everybody, it was beloved, and then it did dwindle on the third one. I don't disagree, But yeah, you said it. You hit the nail on the head. You are being objective rather than subjective about a thing. You're looking at it as a whole. Like you're the photography is great. The sound's good. So many people are so quick, and I try to instill that in my students to get them out of the habit of being like, "Oh, that's what you like, dog? That's garbage." And you're like, "All right, man. Like, there's ways to criticize things and not be a total asshat about it." Be like, well, that's what you're into. Okay, that's not necessarily my thing, and they like a lot of new rap, and I grew up with old school rap, and I'm not like, this is terrible, but I'll break down, I'll be like, I think the lyrics lack substance, and, but I'm not gonna be like, oh, that's hard garbage, bro.
Specifically on that, I'm not like big into rap. There's old school rap that I like and whatever, but it's just not specifically my thing. But there's a video of Snoop Dogg discussing the trend of rap nowadays that is hilarious.
Oh yeah,
he's like, oh, everybody's like, and I'm like, 3 seconds, you just destroyed this. It was hilarious. Obviously, I am biased towards the stuff that I know. Obviously, I'm biased toward the stuff that I know from before that I like. So I'm like, yeah, it's better in my opinion because I grew up with that stuff.
So Celine Dion, Nickelback, who else?
Oh, absolutely.
Speaking of assumptions, you're Canadian. That's the only 2 things you're allowed to listen to. Alanis Morissette, that's a good one.
The first 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, I bought her first 4 albums like on sequence. I was a huge fan.
Oh, dude, Jagged Little Pill was phenomenal. I mean, there's nothing bad to say about that. And
is still.
I'm kidding. I mean, honestly, I won't hate on Celine Dion. She can sing. She's amazing.
Hey, I bought just on that. I bought and this are completely unrelated, mostly because of titles. I bought her second album and Limp Bizkit's second album at the same time. I bought Limp Bizkit's because of the title.
Nookie?
The third.
Significant other, rather?
The third one, Supposed for Me. No, sorry. That was Alanis was Supposed for Me Infatuation Junkie. And Limp Bizkit's was
hot dog flavored water.
Chocolate starfish and the hot dog flavored water. I mean,
it's a good album.
Great title.
It's a great album. Boiler's one of my favorite songs by them.
I mean, if I think too much about it, I'm like, but it's so fun.
Oh,
it's
dude,
so fun. I did it all for the Nookie is from what is the album that has the Nookie? You just said the title.
Yeah, it is Nookie. I think that's the Significant Other.
Significant Other. Yeah. I like Significant Other.
Front to back.
Rollin', the song Rollin'. The song is incredibly dumb. It's so dumb, but it's very catchy.
Oh yeah.
It's very catchy. That is one of the poppiest songs from that time. Is it like new metal kind of vibe?
Yeah, new metal. Yeah, new metal, rapcore, whatever. There's 1,000 different subgenres of metal. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, You've already naturally touched on some of the things I usually like to talk about. So what is probably something that you consider your greatest achievement as far as comic book art goes? Or if there's several, that's fine too.
I mean, I got asked to draw Spider-Man. And when I got asked to draw Spider-Man, I had been in the industry for a while now. So as much as the paycheck offered was inferior to the one I was getting at DC Comics, Marvel gave me literal carte blanche to do whatever I want on the visuals. So like that puts a grin on my face just thinking on it. Like I drew 5 issues of Spider-Man of a miniseries in which I drew whatever I wanted, following the script, of course, but I used storytelling in a way that I wanted. I experimented with whatever I wanted. I put everything that I wanted to do there. That was great. So, and I mean, I'm in a stage right now when I'm writing and drawing. My achievement will then be to put the book that I'm writing and drawing out, to have people consume that and tell me if they liked it or not. But outside of that, yeah, like working in these companies. I mean, where I'm from, working for comics is literally something that you don't even imagine that you will do. Like, it is more feasible for me to think that I will be an engineer and try to go to NASA than to go, I'll draw Spider-Man, I'll work for Marvel Comics. It's just something that you don't think of at all. So
you mean in being from Mozambique initially?
Mozambique, yeah. It's just not something that you even think of in your day-to-day life, because this is so much out of mainstream conversation that you're like, yeah, whatever.
Did you even have access to comic books there?
Yeah, I did.
I don't know much. If I'll be claim complete ignorance about the country.
It's fine. We would get books sent from like charity. Like lots of wagons would come about from everywhere in the world, and we would, because it's a Portuguese former colony, so we would get the stuff that was translated to Portuguese in stores, like bookstores and whatnot. And lastly, South Africa is very close. So I divided my time that I lived in Mozambique between Mozambique and South Africa. And they're comic book shops. They used to have comics on the racks on stores. So I would consume comics like that. But even so, it's children's stuff. So to think that you can aspire to work in that, as I said, you can dream of being a NASA astronaut. You can aspire to that, because it's something that you have to study, get good grades, be an engineer, aspire to get a scholarship. You can even make a plan to apply for NASA. Whereas, well, nowadays you can, but back in the 80s, like, oh, I'm gonna be a comic book artist. What is comics? Artist? You're a bum. Go be an actual person. So I would say that having a career, traveling the world, being where I'm at right now, I never imagined that I could do or be those things. So yeah, I would say that just where I'm at right now is probably a pretty good achievement as it is.
Yeah, dude, and you touched on so many things in there that I find incredibly interesting, because I've never thought about it. So it's all about that perception.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about a trajectory. There isn't a class that you can go to in college to say, all right.
There is now.
Yeah,
there
it's getting
now.
better, graphic design and all that stuff. And then they, get more niche.
No, there's comic schools now.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I remember even when I was a teen, I mean, the biggest comic book school that actually has had a lot of superstars came out of that is a school called the Kubert School. It's in New York. It's pretty old school. I think it's got like 25 plus years of existence. And when I was 17, so this was like 98, 99. I applied because they have also correspondence courses. I applied to the school. I even got accepted, but my dad didn't think that that was a real job, so I went on to study architecture. But yeah, the schools like the Kubert School were rarer at the time, but now they're if you're in the comic book industry or if you're interested in it, there are ways, especially now with the advent of the internet, there's lots of online courses, there's YouTube videos of people doing step-by-step stuff. But at the time, in the 80s, early 90s, it was the only one that I knew was the Kubert School. And it's you have to be in the know to know that that school exists. Outside of that, no.
Yeah, because for me, I didn't know that was a thing, and I hadn't thought about like how do you get there. You know, it's one of those things that, again, I often bring it back to me being a teacher. But when I'm talking to my students, I try to tell them about realistic possibilities. Because not everybody can be an athlete, not everybody can be the next great rap artist, not everybody can be an Instagram influencer. There's only so much room. So you have to find all these different fields and, different cliques and things to get into, and it's like, if you'd asked me that before this conversation, I'd go, I have no idea. So it's interesting to hear how people make their ways into things, whether it be a happy accident or persistence or whatever it may be.
A little bit of both for me.
A little tenacity. So I like to end these conversations off with getting into people's influences. And inspirations. So how did you, and I think that your story will be really unique in comparison to some of the other people I'll have the opportunity to talk to from being from where you are. So you said they carried like kids comics and things like that. Did they carry Spawn or Spider-Man?
All of that. I mean, I grew up with French comics initially. Again, as I said, it is a former Portuguese colony. So most of the stuff that we would get would be the French albums, the Belgium Tintin, Asterix, stuff like that. But if I remember a cousin of mine came from Portugal. He brought a Wolverine comic that it would then become super famous. It's the one that they made a movie out of it with the Wolverine, the one in Japan. So like, I remember the cover. It got me. I even had nightmares over that cover. It's like just Wolverine in darkness, is the claws unsheathed and these eyes shining. It was a striking image drawn by Frank Miller, and like that got the itch for me. So I tried to find like classmates that had it. Trying to find in fact, I even borrowed money from my folks to get comics, which obviously got me in trouble. But when you ask for influences, what exactly are you going? Like influences in the artwork that I do, or influences to get to where I'm at?
There's no wrong answer. I mean, as a comic book artist, I mean, you could, maybe it's in something that occurred in your life that drove you to pursue that, or, artists.
A little, yeah, I would say so. I mean, I went to study architecture in Brazil. And for every other project that I would do, I would always include like a Spider-Man swinging, like Godzilla. Like I would always include stuff that I liked, that are essentially that I got from comics. And I had teachers that were into comics. I had teachers that kept telling me, dude, why are you studying architecture? You should be doing comics yourself. And I'm like, this is not for me. Like, why would I do comics? Everybody else does. Like everybody else does it better. So I remember I had a teacher that he actually got me to make a DeviantArt profile, and through that DeviantArt profile, I started getting gigs. But I specifically had one that his approach to projects in architecture was the one that made me actually enjoy architecture, because at some point I wasn't enjoying it, but he he brought me into the fold, at least for that time. And I used the advice that he gave me to basically formulate the way that I tell stories, which is he kept telling me that everywhere that I look, there is an image that can be used to tell a story. He's like, he had an exercise for us to do, like go home and look at the stuff that you have at home and make a floor plan based on this thing that you have seen. Like anything, make a floor plan out of that. So at the time, I had a VHS tape recorder, and so it was a while ago. So it was like a DVD with VHS on it. So I looked at the interface, and through that interface, I'm like, oh, like this is where you put the CD, or this is where you put the VHS. This can be your entrance and foyer and living room. So from then on, I made a floor plan, and I started looking at stuff that I could use to lay out floor plans, projects, and whatnot. And from then on, when I got into the comic book industry, and especially when I got more leeway to express myself, instead of just using the traditional panel-to-panel 1, 2, and 3 ways of storytelling, I try to use the images that make a page tell you a story as well. So from that incentive that I got from that teacher, I still use it nowadays to try to find images or try to find things around me, or in movies or in games or anything that I can use to encapsulate a scene and use to tell something that I want to tell, rather than just use what's inside a panel. So I would say that this guy had a tremendous influence in what then became my future. And this was even before I started doing comics. He was just talking about a strategy to do like floor plans and enjoy what you're doing.
It's interesting that you have somebody that is kind of on a non-linear path to what you were doing, influence. And I would be willing to bet that you bring maybe another level of precision to your art and the things that you do in comics, because there is a tremendous amount, with architecture. It's all about measurements, and things have to be incredibly accurate and to scale. And that probably, I would think that would maybe help translate in how you have to create things.
You know what? This is where my mask of being an actual serious person just falls, because no, it does not. One of the things that
it would.
I love, the only thing that I would say that it does was when I went to college, I already knew how to do 2-point perspective, 3-point perspective, and forced perspective, because I learned that in school. So in college, in university, I honed that skill a little more. And that is very useful for comics, because if I want to use, like for any scene, if I have dynamic camera angles and whatnot, I use that for that. Outside of that, no. I don't like I don't like to use rulers to do perspective. I do perspective in a way that is in the correct way, but I always do forced perspective, because it's easy to cheat your eyes. If you think you're seeing that this camera angle is correct, it's just an effect. It's just an effect. It works. The scene is working. It's fine.
You're the student I hate.
I am
2-point perspective, and I'm like, use a ruler or it's gonna suck. And
I am the guy that the first cheat code that I find, I'm like, that's it, let's go.
I did have like one kid who was just like a brilliant artist. He's like, I don't need a ruler, Mr. Morris. I was like, this is gonna look like shit. Just telling you, this is hard. And then I come back around, and he's like already ahead of everybody else, drawing skyscrapers and already putting his bushes in and stuff. And I'm like, all right, that's incorrected. You're fine. Yeah. Were your parents, so I know that you talked about your dad, like you need to pick a real career, and did they eventually become supportive of what you did?
Yeah, yeah, They will always because I stopped studying to do comics. I mean, I had an opportunity to at the time I was already working for DC Comics, and I was working on a pretty big book. And even like some months later, I was going to get offered an exclusive contract to be working with them. So working with the company, I was getting well paid, but I was still in college, and I was flunking classes. So like, I remember I was working with a writer that he had friends in Brazil, so he had come visit there, and we went for dinner, and he told me, you gotta choose, you gotta either finish college, or you have to commit to comics, one or the other. The thing about that is that if I had finished college, I would go back to the back of the line in comics, whereas I was already at DC, one of the two biggest companies in the industry. Like, so I stopped doing that. That didn't sit well with the folks. And every now and then I'm still gonna hear like, hey man, you're gonna go back and finish your studies. But as it is, I mean, they're fine with it. My dad even presents me as like, this is the artist. This is my son, the artist. And I'm like, yeah, I am the son, the artist. As you can see, with my hairstyle and piercings and tattoos, I am the son, the artist. None of the others have this.
You took some stereotypes by the head, right?
Yeah.
You're like, I'll own it. Fuck it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I greatly appreciate your time, man. Super, super interesting story. I'm always incredibly interested to hear people's different backgrounds and where they come from and how they got where they were. And I think it's just awesome that you have such a unique segue into the field. And I hope that is maybe one kid will listen to this, maybe one of my students. I might turn them on to it. Be like, once they graduate anyway, I can't let them know that I cuss when I'm still a teacher. Mr. Morris cusses. But maybe one of them will listen to it and they'll be like, damn, dude, I could do that.
That's the ultimate target, to get somebody that was the little me, be like, oh, I like this guy, I'm going to follow that guy. That would be great.
Well, if it happens, I'll let you know. Like, you influenced this person. This is great. It's a win. Well, before I send you out of here, man, do you have anything coming out that you're working on now that people should be looking out for? What pages can they find you? Where can they support the things that you've been a part of?
I am pretty easy to find. If you Google Marco Rudy with the Y, R-U-D-Y, the first thing that comes up is my Facebook, I think, and the next is my DeviantArt page, which I should post a little more stuff. I haven't posted in a while on DeviantArt. However, I'm pretty active on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. All of them is just Marco Rudy in all of those. A word of warning: I am pretty political about. I'm very opinionated, and I'm very progressive. So if all those things because you will see all my opinions on all of these three platforms. If those are not interesting to you, I'm just already telling you that this is what you'll find. And lastly, I am writing and drawing a book. I have been doing that for a while now, a few years. And I post a step-by-step on Patreon for anybody that is interested in how I conceive scenes, what is the reasoning behind my choice of layouts, what's important in the story that I'm telling, what are influences, step by step, from pencil to color, to actually before that, from writing, for sketching, pencil, color, all of that. I have the step by step on Patreon, which would be Patreon/Marco Rudy. So yeah, you can follow me on those platforms, and let me know if you like anything you see.
Fantastic, man. Thank you for your time, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Beautiful.